Flats Cold War Museum Oral History Project. I'm Hannah Nordhaus and I'm interviewing Max Dixon. It is the 8th of June 2005 and we're at Max's house in Golden, south of Golden. And Max, to begin, I'm hoping you can just tell me a little bit about your background, where you were born, when you were born, where you grew up, what your parents did, that sort of thing.
Okay. I was born on a farm back by Hazard, Nebraska. And then as a young boy lived on a farm by Pleasanton. And then about 6 years old I moved to Kearney, Nebraska, and that's where I grew up and graduated from high school. And when in my 20s I came to Colorado.
What year did you say you were born?
1935.
1935.
Makes me 70.
Oh, wow. And your family was farmers, is that right?
Originally.
Originally. And then what did they end up doing?
Oh, my dad just worked in Kearney after he quit the farm. And we graduated from high school there. And my cousins, all of my relations are still farmers back in Pleasanton. And we get together often.
So after you graduated from high school, what happened then?
Oh, I hauled gravel for a couple of years and worked on an irrigation well rig one summer. And then I came to Colorado and I worked in downtown Golden for a few years. I went in the Army for 2 years in 1958 and 59.
Where were you stationed?
Yeah, stationed at Carrizozo, New Mexico. I took my basic in down in Colorado Springs. And then I was shipped to a little camp in New Mexico where people from the missile sites on the coast, they would come there once a year and practice shooting missiles at little target planes.
So it was down near White Sands somewhere? Is that, yeah.
Just right north of White Sands.
Okay.
We could see the white if we looked south.
Carrizozo is called?
Carrizozo.
Okay.
It was good duty. It was just a small camp. And I was a clerk typist. Never could get very fast.
And so after the Army, what happened?
I worked in downtown Golden for a couple of years, and then I went to Rocky Flats.
So what year was that?
I started at Rocky Flats in 1967.
And did you know anything about Rocky Flats before you interviewed there?
Not really. I can't remember what I knew about it. I know I was reading these questions, and I just can't remember what I knew about Rocky Flats. I didn't know it's what it produced or anything like that.
So how did you find out about the job there?
Well, I don't think you could live in Golden and not learn about Rocky Flats. But I did know one or two people that worked there, and they talked good about it. So I did go out and apply in Rocky Flats.
What was the job that you applied for?
The first started as a janitor, which was typical of so many workers at Rocky Flats. And I enjoyed it. It was good work. And then it's typical of Rocky Flats. You would sign on as janitor, and then you would bid into other jobs. See? And so I bid into a clerk packer's job. I was only a janitor about a couple of months, I think. Then I was a clerk packer. And I worked there about a year and a half, I believe. And we kept track of all the parts. We did the book work.
That came in or went out or did both?
Yeah.
All of the above?
As they moved around the plant and everything.
Okay.
I was a shop clerk, yeah, and we kept the books. And we had books for every part, and kept track of it and its movement around the plant. And one night, we had the books, we had to lock them in a safe overnight, and I left one out overnight once and I got in a little trouble. It was called a security infraction.
What would happen when you committed a security infraction?
There wasn't anything come from it, but I don't think you'd want to get 2 or 3 in a row. It would be disaster, I believe. But yeah, I was real careful about that. And then, after I was shop clerk for about a year and a half, I bid into the labs. And I was always thankful for that. I thought that was a very good place to work.
So bidding into is applying for, is that what it is?
We call it bidding, yeah, it's applying for it. And to get in the labs, you had to have high school chemistry and high school physics. So I went back and did a night course on high school physics and completed that, and then I was eligible for the labs.
Did you do you have any recollection of the first time you saw the plant? What your experience of it was?
First time I saw the
Yeah,
plant?
like, you know, had you been in a big industrial, I don't know what you did in Golden before, but had you worked in a factory before in a sort of industrial environment?
I've never been in a factory, or I never worked for a big company like that. And I can't remember my reaction. Of course, we went to one building and worked there as a starter. I think it was 881. And I just didn't know much about anything at Rocky Flats, so I just did my work in that building.
And did you have to wait to get clearance?
Yes, I think it took about 9 months for me to get a clearance.
Did they ask you all sorts of questions and
It-
ask your
well,
family questions?
I can't remember if they interviewed me that much. I'm sure they did. They interviewed everybody around me, all my neighbors,
Really?
all my old friends back in Kearney, Nebraska. They interviewed them. And I was real glad I had a clean history, because any little thing I think would have kept me out of Rocky Flats.
Did you give them that information of the names of people, or did they just find them?
I think I gave the names
Okay.
of people they could go see. And they did. They asked about my background and if I'd ever been in trouble or anything like that. Just typical questions.
So, were you married at this point?
Yes, I was married when I started there.
And did you were you able to tell your wife, or I don't know if you had kids at that point, but were you able to tell them what you did for a living?
I could some. I never had any problems of hiding anything, but I just, if there's something we weren't supposed to talk about, we just didn't talk about, so nobody was curious.
Right.
You see. But like when I was a janitor, I wasn't anything secret there.
And you weren't working in were you working in the hot zone then, or?
No, I never did work in a plutonium building. I worked with uranium, mostly depleted uranium, sometimes 235, which is kind of hot. It can go critical if you're not careful. But I never did work with plutonium. That was 59 labs and the other buildings over there.
Okay.
You know.
So, so I think we left you when you got the job in the lab. And why don't you tell me what that job was, and we can just continue through your employment history.
I can't remember what my first job was in the labs. We had to do a lot of training, of course, and we took an international correspondence school course. It was either 2 years or 4 years, I don't remember what it was. And we learned something of that, but mostly we just learned by working in the labs and working with the chemist and working with the solvents and the acids and this kind of thing.
So what was it exactly that you were doing?
Well, in the labs analyzed just about everything that come into plant. And of course all the parts that came in. A lot of times, like a beryllium hemishell would come in, well, there'd be a bottle of powder from that same part, you know, or made from the BE made from that part. So that would come to the labs, and we would analyze that for impurities.
And if there were impurities, then it couldn't be used?
No, it would probably be rejected, but most of the time they were okay. The companies that sent the parts, they pretty well knew what they were doing. And you know, like I say, we analyzed almost everything that come into plant, like the freon that come in for cleaning, we analyzed that. And we analyzed air from all around the plant in different buildings. We went to different buildings and took air samples. And we'd analyze that for carbon monoxide and anything that shouldn't be there. A lot of times I would go over to those buildings and get the air sample. And like I say, we analyzed just about everything. Stainless steel, all the stainless steel that come into plant, we'd analyze that. I worked in the X-ray department for a while, and that's where we analyzed the stainless steel, one part of it, for make sure it has the right percentage of competition of nickel and that kind of thing. All good work. Yes, all nice work working in the labs.
Was it easier than being a janitor and being a clerk?
Oh,
Or more interesting?
I can't say that. Some of the places in the labs were you had to keep pretty busy to get the things done. We worked in the water lab for quite a while. We rotated all around the labs to learn all the different things that are there, so we could be flexible. And I remember working in the water lab. That was go 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 all the day long.
Oh yeah. Why was that?
Tried to get all the samples done.
Because there were more samples.
A lot of samples. Yeah, we analyzed water from all over the plant, all the creeks that ran through it, and all the water that was discharged, and every part of the water.
Tap water too?
Yeah, we the plant had about 50 wells down in the ground, some like 100 feet deep, that we would go and take samples of that water and analyze to make sure there wasn't getting any radioactivity in it or anything that shouldn't be there. And that was pretty hard work. We would have to send this thing down by hand and gather up like a gallon of water at a time and pull it back up with a rope, dump it till we got so much water out, and then we'd take a sample. You see, we'd flush it.
And then you'd bring the sample back to the lab,
bring
and you
the
had
sample back to the
equipment that
lab
could
and,
tell you
yeah,
what was in it.
Analyze it for anything that shouldn't be there. They kept pretty good tabs of all the water and everything around the plant.
Yeah, I bet. So then, I understand you worked your way up in the labs. Is that right? You became a foreman
Yeah.
at the end, or?
Well, the lab techs were actually all one level.
Okay.
You see, we did our correspondence course and then learned all the different things in the labs to do. But there wasn't any different levels of the laboratory technicians.
Mm-hmm.
But the last year and a half I worked at the plant, they made me I was a foreman, and I went salaried. You see, before that I was hourly and in the union.
Uh-huh.
And to be a foreman, I went salaried. And they asked me if I wanted to be a foreman. I said, sure, I'll do it. And that worked really good for me, helped my retirement. And by the time I was done, we weren't foremen, we were technical supervisors.
Ah.
You see, I've always kept this. They made that for me.
So, what was your job as a foreman?
Well, we had about 30 lab techs under us. So there was another person, Bob Del Pizzo, and I were both the technical supervisors there, or foremen.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept track of all the hours and the time cards for them, and working overtime. You know, we'd point them to work overtime if necessary,
Mm-hmm.
and everything like that. A lot of things like that. It was a busy job, it really was.
So, did you, after having been in the union for so many years,
Mm-hmm.
was it strange to be on salary?
Well, I was still in the labs. I was a foreman in the labs, so I knew my way around there.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I worked with the foremans for years, so it wasn't really any strange feeling. I know I never did apply for a salary job before, because when you do, you give up your seniority. You see, and I had about 20-some years of seniority, and you don't want to give that up too easy. But I did, and I was always glad I did.
Does if you had given up your seniority, the salary job wouldn't have paid as well as some of as being a senior
Well, the
hourly
salary
person?
actually paid better, but if there was big layoffs, then you're vulnerable. See, you don't have any
okay.
seniority there,
Oh, okay.
like you do when you're hourly.
Right. So you retired of your own. You didn't end up getting laid off, though. You retired of your
No,
own
I
volition.
took an early buyout,
Oh, you did.
and they were doing that then, and that worked really good for me.
Did you continue to work after you left?
No, I have a piano biz. I tune and rebuild pianos,
Oh, you do.
and so I did some of that
Wow.
after I retired.
Do you play piano?
No, I don't play. I just tune.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, did you, having been in the union, did you feel that the union had much importance or impact at Rocky Flats?
I think the union helped get the pay increases quite well for the hourly people. Other than that, I really didn't think I needed the union that much. I never did file any grievances, which is if you feel somebody did something wrong to you, you could file a grievance, but I never did file any grievance. I never had any problems that way.
I've heard people complain that well, especially management people, that the job descriptions were so set in stone that you couldn't, if you wiped up somebody else's mess, you get in big trouble. What did you find that it was pretty rigid that way?
Yeah, it was. You didn't infringe on somebody else's work, not just in the labs, but like you wouldn't want to do any electrical work or any plumbing or anything like that. You see, you had to stick with your laboratory work.
What about safety? Do you feel that the union stuck up for the safety of workers at Rocky Flats?
Yeah, everybody stuck up for safety at Rocky Flats. Safety was a big issue there, and we even had contests for slogans for safety, and we had safety meetings once a month that we talked to somebody to talk about something safety, but safety was a big issue for both the salaried and the hourly. Really promoted it.
Well, what were the safety issues in the labs that you had to be particularly conscious of?
Safety glasses. We had to wear safety glasses all the time, and safety shoes. And you worked safely. You worked with acids, and I could say beryllium and stuff like that. You had to be very careful, but you knew what to do. And we worked in the hoods, of course. We didn't have the stuff out in the open. But I don't recall any problems with safety issues in the labs.
Were you ever exposed to any contamination of any sort?
No. You talking about radioactivity?
Or I guess beryllium or solvents or anything like that?
I handled a lot of beryllium, especially when I was a shop clerk, because we would unpack the hemi-shells and put them on a shelf, and then the clerk packers would move them from there. But most of our work was done in hoods and in the labs, you see, so we really weren't exposed to much. And we had solvents. Carbon tetrachloride was one we didn't breathe. We kept that in a hood, and we were very careful with that. But sometimes Bob Del Pizzo and I would go over to building 886, and we would work with uranium-235. And that's the only time I really worked with anything that was very radioactivity. And of course, we were very careful there. You always wore gloves, and you worked in a hood.
So you never set off any of the radiation monitors or anything
No.
like that? Never had any exposures?
Never really got contaminated. Sometimes you would get something on your hand and it'd be hard to wash off, but you would do it.
So the public has a sense that Rocky Flats was a dangerous place to work. Did you ever feel that this might have been so, if not for you, then for your colleagues, or did you think it was overblown in the media?
Well, it never was unsafe for me. There was some accidents there. When you have 3,000 people working, you're going to have somebody get hurt, I think. And we used to have safety dinner dances where our section would work so many hours without an accident or loss of time accident. We would get a safety dinner dance at Lakewood Country Club. So everybody tried to really work safe. I remember kind of when I first started, there was a person that was filling gas in a Caterpillar on the back of a lowboy truck, and he fell and broke a hip, and he died in the operation. And I don't know if that was the only death I ever heard of or not. But like I say, when you have 3,000 people, you're going to have some mishaps.
Yeah.
And there was a couple people I knew of that got a pretty bad contamination over in the hot buildings. But they took good care of them. I know one person, I think a can of plutonium caught on fire, and he got some smoke from it. He stayed and tried to put it out, and he come over and worked in our lab. And they sent him somewhere out of state and had his lungs washed out with a saline solution.
Mm.
And there was a couple cases like that, but nothing ever around me.
That's nice for you.
Yeah.
What about, in terms of all the protests and stuff that went on in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
where the public began to have the perception that it was very unsafe? Did you feel that was fair or truthful?
Yeah, I think the newspapers gave Rocky Flats some bad news. I don't think they ever said anything good about it. But I never did confront any protesters or anything. Of course, they couldn't get on plant site. They had to be out along the highway. Mm-hmm. And at the West Gate, for a long time, there was 2 or 3 nuns that would stand at the gate. Sometimes we'd wave at them and they'd wave back, but I never had any problems with protesters. I never did agree with them, because I've always felt that it was necessary to have Rocky Flats. If we hadn't have had nuclear weapons, Russia would have, and I think we'd have really been under their foot if we didn't have nuclear weapons. So I was always glad to be a part of it.
Did the protesters, did you feel insulted by them or offended, or did you just think it was a bit of a nuisance?
Well, I never did see them, except for those 3 nuns. And I didn't agree with what they're doing. I thought they were wasting their time. But other than that, no problems.
Did you participate? I know there was a pro-Rocky Flats rally. Did you participate?
Yes, I did on that. If I remember right, we only had one. And I was driving a van for the van pool one time, and so I drove people around with a van on that protest. I can't remember much about it. We had a lot of people there, and that's it. I only remember one. I think that's the only one we ever had.
So back to the union stuff. I'm wondering, was there? Did you feel that there was ever a lot of tension between the union and management?
Well, yes, there was some. I can't think of any particular incidences. A lot of people would file grievances over some little thing sometimes, and I didn't really agree with that. I never had any problems with management, but some people, I guess if they didn't want to work too hard, the union would kind of protect them, and there's some problems that way.
Did you strike ever?
Yes, we had one strike, I think in '72.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was 70 days or 72 days. I think we called it like 70 days and 72 or vice versa. I don't remember which. But like I say, I had my piano business, and I run an ad in the Boulder paper and to sell pianos, and they ran that ad for about a month. So I had a lot of people call me, and I'd run a lot of pianos up to Boulder.
So
But I'd go past the people that were striking,
Did you picket? Did you?
the people that were picketing. I did once or twice. I did.
Did you support? I mean, did you support the cause of the strike, or was it you just couldn't go to work because of the strike?
I really didn't like the strike, and we were with. I don't remember if we were with the United Mine Workers then. I think we were with the steel workers during that strike. and I wasn't in favor of it at all because I was scared because at first we wouldn't get a paycheck, and I'd never been out of work before. But it worked out good for me. I made just about as much money on pianos. But that strike was futile. We went back to work, I think, for less than we went out for.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Were people mad at the union leadership, or that was just did the
I
strike
think-
make it better than it would have been had you not?
I think some were kind of unhappy with them. I know the big boys from the mine workers came and we had meetings. And they said, "You guys go back to work. Your strike's exhausted." And the Rocky Flats officers said, "No, we're not going back to work. We got them right where we want them." See? But it never happened.
So what was it? So you worked there when Dow was there, and then when
Mhm.
Rockwell took over. What was the difference between the two? And I guess for EG&G as well, right? If you quit 2
Yeah.
years ago. So why don't you
It
tell me
really
the-
didn't affect us that much in the labs. I know once when somebody took over, I don't know if it was Rockwell, we got a good pay increase, almost $1 an hour.
Mhm.
And so that worked real good. But other than that, as far as getting different names on the paychecks, I wasn't affected.
So you didn't notice any, that the work environment changed in any way or anything like that?
Mm-mm. No, not really.
Okay. So what was it like to work in such high security?
I was always kind of proud that I had a Class Q clearance. I thought that was kind of neat. It took a lot of work to get it, but I was always like that. And of course, you had to show your badge every time you went in
Mm-hmm.
to a different building or something. But other than that, there wasn't any problems.
And was it hard not to be able to discuss the work with your family and friends?
To discuss the work
Yeah.
with family? No. Like I say, you wouldn't volunteer any information, and I'm sure I was probably asked a couple of times what we did, but I'd always get around it. I could tell them I analyzed samples.
Mm-hmm.
It was things like that. But, stuff I knew that went on that the news would like to know about, we never brought it up, see?
Right.
So we didn't have any problems that way.
What I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about a typical day at work. What sort of what
Okay.
involved getting in the buildings
Mhm.
and the different clothing you might have to wear and stuff like that. If you could walk me through that.
We would park in the parking lot and go through the guard shack and go down to our work area, whichever one it was. Like I say, we rotated all around the labs and did different things.
And why was that you rotated? They just
So we
Right.
could, if one person got sick in another department, we could go over there
help out.
and help out, yeah. And that was the main reason, something like that, to get to know all the parts of the labs. And then it was good for us. It didn't get boring doing one thing,
Mhm.
you see. I'll tell you, the one part I really liked was emission spectroscopy. And we had balance rooms. We had 2 rooms with 4 balances in it.
Mhm.
And each time we'd have to weigh up our samples. We'd sit there at the balance and there'd be 2 or 3 or 4 of us. And we'd have some really good conversations with each other, discussions. And when you work with people for 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week plus, you really get to know them, their weak points and strong points. And people would talk about a lot of things. We had good discussion. And then in E-Spec, when we shoot our samples, we had a dark room. It's just like film, see, photographic plates. And we'd go in the dark room and we'd load these glass plates, about that long, about that high, into a cassette and put it on the machine. And then we'd go out and shoot our samples with an electric arc. And that would run a thing to the plates. Then we'd go back in the dark room, we'd develop them. And of course you couldn't see anything, you did everything by feel. And that was kind of fun work.
So emission
Emission
spectroscopy
spectroscopy.
is so you take the material and you shoot it with a ray, and then it emits something so you can tell what the chemical
Emits a light.
composition is.
And different elements will emit different streak of light. See, and you would read those plates on a reader compared to a standard plate, and look for impurities like iron and copper and stuff like that.
Oh, that sounds cool.
I think mostly we did that with uranium samples.
And what would be if there was iron in your uranium? What was the problem with that?
If there were too much, you're allowed so much, like maybe 50 ppm or something like that. I can't remember, it's been too long ago. But if there were too much impurities, they would reject that part.
Because it wouldn't work as intended.
It had to be certain criteria.
So you take the part, because you said there was a powder that came along with the part.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it would just be the part itself, and you'd have to run rays light through it or electricity
Yeah,
to figure out what.
Like with uranium, when a machinist would turn a part on his machine, he would there would be turnings come off of it, and that would be sent to the labs, and we would analyze that.
Oh, okay.
You see.
And those would come from within Rocky Flats, not from the people who made it, or both?
Well, I don't know where they got the uranium from. It came to Rocky Flats in different forms, and then the machinist would turn it. I think they had foundries. They had foundries that would form these parts out, maybe out of a big block, and they'd form these parts and then send them to a machinist to machine them to certain thicknesses and dimensions, and they'd make a part that way.
So we were talking about the typical day, and I interrupted you when you were saying that you rotate to different labs, but so you were going to say you went to a different building depending on the assignment?
Sometimes we go to different buildings to get samples. Well, and like I say, we worked over in 86 building sometimes with that 235. But most of the time I stayed right in 881, and the stuff would come to us. We'd analyze it.
81 was an early one, right? It was was that the underground one? Or was it, yeah.
It's mostly underground, yeah. The front part was all underground, the back part was out. Big building.
Yeah.
And I guess it's all torn down now.
That's what I hear. What was the, that was such an early, what was the environment in the building like? Like, what was the building like itself?
Well, the building had hallways and rooms and all over the place. It was a big building. And of course, the labs had at least 2 very large rooms to work in. And but we would get around the building sometimes, but not much. We stayed in the labs.
And I assume there are no windows or anything like that?
No.
Yeah.
I don't remember any windows in there. We had a back dock that we would go out on sometimes for break and get a little sunshine or something, fresh air. Otherwise, we were underground.
And was it concrete? Was it
All
all made of
concrete.
concrete?
Thick concrete, very thick concrete. Because I think it was made to withstand explosions in case we had a atomic nuclear attack.
Right.
I know when I first started there, there was an air raid shelter down in the basement, and they had candy and water in there for people in case we had to go down there and stay a week. But then later on they did away with that.
Did people ever go in and eat the candy?
I don't know what happened to it.
On their breaks. So did you, when you did move around to different buildings, did like different buildings have a different culture in any way? I mean, was one building more sort of where people worked with plutonium? Was there a different?
Yeah. I can't remember. I went into the hot buildings, but I took some air samples, I believe we went there for. And there's just certain places in there we went. Even in the hot buildings, I think the hallways and everything like that was clear and
Mm-hmm.
clean. It's just the stuff in the hoods that you didn't want to mess
Right.
with. Yeah.
And were the people different? Were the people who worked with plutonium different than the people who worked with uranium and the lab
Not
techs?
really. I knew a lot of people from around the plant, and no, there's no difference. It's just wherever they put you,
Mm-hmm.
you see, that it would be the same kind of people
Right.
everywhere.
So let's see. You got there in 1967. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could tell me your memories of the 1969 fire.
I wasn't involved with that. I know when I got in the carpool that morning, the guy said, "I hope we have a job to go to." I didn't know anything about it. It's on the news, I'm sure. But a lot of the people in the labs, I think most of the chemists would go over there on certain days and work and help clean up.
Mm-hmm.
But I never did. I guess it was a pretty bad fire. But I wasn't affected by it, and it didn't affect me at all.
How about the FBI raid?
The what?
The FBI raid.
Oh, no, they didn't come in our area either. I know I knew a guy. I was talking to him one day that was over in another building. He had a desk, and he said an FBI man came in and he had his hand on his gun, and he said, "You get up and don't touch a thing and go outside." And he said those were not good times for him, because someone informed him. They said, "You don't have to be guilty to go to jail," and that worried him. I don't even remember his name. But of course, I didn't like that raid either. I don't think they ever found anything that they were looking for. And I always thought we got one group of government fighting another group of government, and the taxpayers are paying the money.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in favor of that for some reason.
How did you feel when you learned that they were stopping production for good?
Things got different when we stopped production. During production, nobody questioned cost or anything like that. Of course, in lab tech, we didn't think anything about cost either. But after we quit production, then they got very cost conscious, and they'd say, it costs so much to do a sample, and they could send it off site cheaper. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things like that. It was a different work environment. In the labs now, we still analyzed a lot of water, a lot of things we still analyze, but we didn't, I don't suppose we had any more stainless steel. Mostly cleanup work that we analyzed.
Were you upset that they had stopped production?
Oh, no, I wasn't really upset. I think I was a little more concerned about the job. I'm sure there was going to be layoffs, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But I had pretty good seniority, and wasn't concerned there. But it was a different type of work and really different atmosphere, because, like I say, we were cost conscious now, and we had to try and work around that. And because of us at Rocky Flats, I guess it costs more to do a sample than if they sent it off site, because we had all the security stuff and things like that to work through.
Of course, you were there anyhow, and they were paying you regardless, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but even with
It was the supervisors more that had to worry about the cost,
Uh-huh.
but we were informed of it too.
yeah.
It was a problem.
Huh. Did you like your work as much when it was cleanup work versus production?
Oh, I think it was better during production, because it seems like things went smoother, and like I say, they weren't cost conscious that much. And I think we had just as much work afterward, because like I say, working in the water labs, we want to analyze water from all over the plant. I suppose we weren't getting in any more stainless steel. I don't know. I think Rocky Flats got stainless steel and we analyze it and approve it or disapprove. And it went to other nuclear facilities too, see. So maybe that kept going after the shutdown. But like I say, it was different.
Did you feel different about your job, about what you were doing for your country, or I mean, did your job feel less meaningful after production stopped?
No. I guess you weren't doing anything for your country then after it was shut down, but we still had a job. Still worked at it. We knew they were cleaning it up and going to close it. And some people said they'll never get this place closed. But they have. Pretty much, I heard they just tore down the last building.
Did you think they should have closed it? Did you think it was, given how much the community had grown around it, did you think that it made sense to have a plant there still?
There's going to be a lot of jobs lost. Like I say, I think there were 3,000 working there when I was there. And so, all the businesses around, they liked Rocky Flats because there are a lot of, brought them money.
Yeah.
And of course, that'll come to an end. But me being retired, I don't affect me.
And do you think that the plant can be cleaned up to the level that they say
Yes,
it will? Yeah.
definitely. I know when we used to go out and do the wells, there wasn't any contamination around in we call it the perimeter. And I think all the contamination they've cleaned up and shipped out. There was some in those hot buildings, I know, that they put in barrels and boxes and stuff and shipped out.
I'm not sure at what point when you were there, it seemed like that initially there were not many women who were working in a lot of the hourly jobs. They were mostly secretaries and in the front office type jobs. Was there a point at which more women came in and were your co-workers, and did that change the environment in any way?
Yeah, I remember when I was a shop clerk over in 44 building, there was one girl came in on the PM shift to do something. I don't remember where she worked, but she would come walking through in her white coveralls. We all wore white coveralls, and it looked different. But we had a lot of women in the labs, and I just can't remember how fast they came in or what. Just.
And then, were there any issues with integrating them into the?
No, we never had any issues. Like I say, in the balance room, we'd sit and discuss things. But I know around plant side, other places there were some problems where some guy did what he shouldn't have, but a couple of them. But I don't remember any in the labs at all.
Okay, well, I just have a few more questions. Wondering how you feel about working in a plant that produced a key part of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, well, like I say, I felt that we had to have nuclear weapons or we would have been in trouble with Russia. Like one person said, Russia would have blackmailed us, something awful. Yeah. And so I really felt that we had to have them. So I had no compunction about working out there at all.
What were the best things about working at Rocky Flats?
Oh, the benefits were good. Retirement was good. And it was good wages, and it was a good, safe place to work. I thought there was safety all over the place. And I felt I was safer working there than a person working in a filling station. They would get a lot more odors and things than we did.
How about the worst things?
Oh, the worst thing sometimes was because of all the safety features, sometimes it's hard to get things done. You had to work around this and that. For instance, after we shut down, we had a carbon analyzer in a hood that we had to get rid of. And it's difficult to dispose of something like that. You have to have the electricians involved, you have to have plumbers involved, and of course the monitors for radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for this particular carbon analyzer, we had a meeting of 16 or 18 people from different groups to figure out how he's going to do that carbon analyzer, get it out there and put it in a coffin. We had coffins that were plywood, and they were 4 foot high and 4 foot wide and 8 feet long. We'd fill them up and put a lid on them, and then they would go somewhere. But it was funny, this particular carbon analyzer, we had that meeting with, say, 16 people. And before any work was done, one of the supervisors asked a foreman, says, "Do you have a coffin you can put that carbon analyzer in?" And he said, "Yeah, he did." And the supervisor said, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's great." So he understood that he wanted to take that carbon analyzer out of there. So he had one guy help him, and I think he took that carbon analyzer out of there and put it in a coffin. And we got in trouble with all the electricians and the plumbers, and it took a lot of explaining to get over that. But things like that happen.
Anything else that was hard about working there?
I can't think of anything in particular.
So it's just the bureaucracy from time to time and the over-regulation or
Mm-hmm.
hyper-regulation.
A lot of times samples, they had to be certain specifications of combination of different elements, and sometimes you'd have to run them more than once to make sure it was in that spec. Sometimes you'd read one and maybe a carbon was too high or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd re-standardize your machine and run it again, and most of the time they're okay.
Well, you were going to show me these baseball caps, so why don't we do that now?
Mm-hmm. These are some I collected while I was working there. Now this one, we had some made for 81 labs. Mm-hmm. And I think we were the only group out there that bought our own hats. And I did this then. I went around and asked who wanted a hat, and almost everybody did. And these are just some pond puppies. They had ponds that they cleaned up. And so I acquired one of those, and it's building 771 and building 374. And
do they wear these to work, or are these just for after work kind of thing?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think after work. Yeah, I don't believe they wore them at work.
Couldn't wear them on. I guess you had to wear the
And this was from the trucking part, I guess.
plant services. Cool.
And you can have those for the museum if you'd like them.
Great, thanks. Yeah, those are cool. Anything else that we've forgotten?
No, I was going to say one thing I really liked about Rocky Flats was they furnished the clothing and the shoes and the glasses. And even if we had prescription glasses, they would have safety glasses built for them. And that was good. We didn't have to wear our own clothes. And even underwear they furnished. And steel-toed shoes. And then at the end of the day, we showered. See, so we'd come home all nice and clean. And that was one thing I really liked, one of the good benefits of Rocky Flats.
So you didn't have to bring your own equipment.
Mm-mm. Some people wore their own clothes because they didn't like to change, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of the years, we had white coveralls. Everybody wore white coveralls. And then they decided that wasn't the best, so we switched to called scrubs, like they wear in the hospital.
Ah,
And they
blue?
called them,
Were they blue?
they're green,
Green?
and they called them modesty clothing because that's just about all they were, just barely clothes. But we wore those.
Anything else?
I was going to say something I always thought was funny that we analyze everything that come into the plant, and one of the things was denatured alcohol. No, it was methyl alcohol, the good drinking kind. And the warehouse would get them in 5-gallon cans, and they would send one over to us to analyze and to make sure it didn't have any impurities or anything like that. But When it went back and forth from the warehouse to the labs, it had to be carried by guards, which we call couriers. And I know when we'd send it back, when we got it, we had to sign for it, and when we'd send it back, we'd make out paperwork and call the guards, and they would come get it. Because they didn't trust the truckers with that good drinking alcohol. And I've always thought that was kind of funny.
Do they have guards for other stuff too, or just the alcohol?
No, the guards did mostly other things. They guarded guard posts, always in there. And
Did they guard all the materials that came to the labs, or just the ones that were sensitive?
no, just like I say, just the alcohol. They carried it back and forth because they didn't trust the truckers.
What about uranium? They wouldn't guard the uranium?
I don't recall how the uranium came in and out, or stainless steel either. I think we just shipped them back and forth to trucking.
Oh, it's funny.
Of course, they couldn't drink that, you see.
Right? You can't drink uranium. Did you ever taste the...
No, I never did.
It would just be like straight alcohol, right? It
Yeah,
wouldn't be...
it's pure alcohol.
Yeah.
It's considered probably 190 proof.
Wow.
Pure alcohol, yeah. And but most of the alcohol was denatured, which means people don't dare drink it.
Right.
But every once in a while they'd use that pure ethyl alcohol. I don't know what for, but they used it.
So, has your pension been everything that you would have wanted it to be? Is it?
Very happy with it, yes.
Yeah.
And me going salaried before I retired, it seemed like in that year and a half, my wages went up and pension, I guess, went up too, and it worked real good for me.
And are you nervous that your pension will get cut at any point?
I don't. I think it's pretty secure. And I feel the same way about our medical insurance. Of course, I'm on Medicare now, yeah. And but I still have that insurance as the backup. And I think being how we worked in a nuclear plant, that's always pretty secure. So I think, from what I hear of the pension, it's secure. They got a big fund in there.
Yeah.
And it's not like a private company that's going to use it up.
So how did you end up in Golden initially?
Oh, I worked in downtown Golden for a while.
You came there for work? Did you
No.
move from Nebraska to Golden for
Yeah.
a job? Or?
And I had a brother that lived in West Denver, and he had some relation that worked downtown Golden, and I got a job down there that way, so I moved to Golden.
And what did you do in downtown Golden?
I worked at a false drug company.
So that was a pharmacy?
No,
Or was it-
no.
oh, manufacturing kind of?
Just in the store, and
Okay.
a lot of it in the warehouse part of the store.
So was the move to Rocky Flats then a big step up in terms of salary?
Yes, yes. I remember when I was working as a janitor there, I was over in 44 building, and I found that the machinist made about $150 a week. Back this would be 67. See? I thought, boy, if I could ever work up to get that, I'd really be in Fat City. And of course, over the years, we surpassed that. Got good raises there.
Yeah. So it was a good living.
Mm-hmm. It really was, and good benefits.
So anything else?
No, I think
Gone through your
that's
list
about all we
here?
can talk about.
Great.
Another thing we analyzed was the fuel oil. They had big tanks out there with fuel oil that they would use in case electricity got shut off. And I would analyze that. And that'd take about 2 or 3 days to analyze that.
Really? How did you analyze it?
For several different things. One of the things was for calories, how many calories per, I don't know, gram or whatever it was, to see how good oil it was. And we had a instrument that we'd put so much in, and then we'd fire it and see how much heat came from that and see how good the oil was. That oil, when it was cold, it was just like tar. I don't know how if they ever burned it. But we analyzed a lot of that.
Okay. Well, that it?
I believe so.
Right. Look at your notes real quick.
I had a nephew as an electrician, and he went out to Rocky Flats to work a couple of times. He'd come up and stay with us, but he was always scared
Yeah.
working there because you can't see radioactivity, and I think he just felt it was all around him, and so finally he just wouldn't go there anymore.
Really? But you were never scared that way?
No, a lot of people feared that. They had a fear of radioactivity because you can't see it. And that's one problem with radioactivity. But never did bother me. No, I wasn't worried because I knew where it was and where it wasn't.
Did you learn a lot about it while you were working at Rocky Flats?
Yeah, we went to a lot of classes when we worked at Rocky Flats. And as one thing, getting toward the end, I thought we were overclassed, and we had to send, as a foreman, we had to send our technicians to classes just all the time, constantly, for different things that sometimes didn't pertain to the work, but they were required. For one thing, like class, you'd learn what kind of signs the Department of Transportation would put on their trucks for different toxic stuff, you know, and that didn't affect us.
Yeah.
But with lots of classes, so we probably learned a lot we didn't have to.
Now if you see a Department of Transportation truck, you'll know, you'll know what it's in there.
But of course, a lot of it was good too that we did and we worked with.
Well, thank you very much for participating. This was great, and I will turn the.
I hope it's all satisfactory.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.